Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com live podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and joining me tonight is Efren Ramos, our normal regular, and our special guest for the night, Ian Wharton of the Bleacher Report. Ian, it's nice to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Big fan of the show, and obviously regular season coming, so perfect time to jump on and talk some Dolphins.
For sure, man, for sure. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. We got some Falcons stuff going on. We got some Dallas Thomas discussions to have, talking about Ryan Tannehill as well. And a very quick add-on to what we're going to be talking about tonight. We'll likely be talking about the release of the former Buffalo Bills running back Fred Jackson. And we'll probably discuss real quick about whether it would be worth it to see if we can bring him on as a one-year rental deal. But we'll get to that near the end of the show. So for right now, I want to talk real quick about the Dolphins versus the Falcons. And I find it actually funny because the one game that we actually have won in the preseason, it was actually overall one of the uglier games that we've played. It was not very clean. There were a lot of penalties being thrown around. There were a bunch of mistakes. It was one of those games that you would classify as an ugly win. There was not a whole lot of stuff going. Once the first team defense left the field, everything else was pretty much not liking what I'm seeing so much, but at least we won. You kind of have to add that as a little consolation prize. It's like, well, at least we won. But overall, it was not really a pretty thing. There were a few things that I really like to see. Jarvis Landry running around, making people miss, including his own teammates who couldn't figure out where to start a block because he kept moving around. That was actually really funny and really awesome. There were some Lamar Miller moments as well. Again, Ryan Tannehill showing a much better pocket presence than he's ever shown before, I think, because considering the overall offensive line that he had to deal with, it was not much of something to work with. So,
Hey guys, how's it going?
we got Max joining us. Max Himmelreich from the Deep End Miami. Max, nice to have you on. We're talking Dolphins Falcons right now.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, I'm just going to a real quick review. We won 13-9. It was not a whole lot to be proud about, but hey, we showed that we saw what the defensive line can do, especially when they're dealing with an offensive line that is reminiscent to our own, where we're really not sure where we stand with that. Although at this point, I would think that our offensive line is improving. And there's still more room for improvement, especially considering that we still have players who normally start that are currently not starting. That's looking at you, Brandon Albert, but don't rush back. We still need you. So I'm going to ask you guys, whoever wants to jump in first can. I want to ask you guys, what did you feel about the Dolphins-Falcons game? Anything you really like to see? Anything in particular that you really didn't like?
Well, one thing I thought that stood out to me was Lamar Miller, and he was catching the ball a lot. And Ryan Tannehill was looking at him early. He had 38 catches last year. That's going to go up. I think he's going to be over 50. He was just targeted a lot, and Tannehill was like trusting him early. Like on first down, starting drives out like that. I think he had like 2 first down throws, like beginning the whole drive, throwing it to Miller. And it looks like they're trusting him a lot, and he looked stronger going up the middle. Landry's been like shooting up in fantasy recently, like he's going in the second round, and I want him. I want to draft Miller, but he's getting pricey, and I get why. He's catching the ball a lot, and he's running stronger. Pretty pumped about him.
That's probably the extra bulk in action, the one that I've been recently talking about today, and we'll get into that a little later. But Ian, your thoughts, since you're our special guest, I'll let you chime in now.
Yeah, it was an ugly game, especially offensively. Like that was really the game where I was hoping you'd see the offense kind of explode a little bit more, especially against such a weak opponent. I think Atlanta's a well-coached team. I'm really impressed with the coaching staff that they have, especially Kyle Shanahan. The talent that they have is severely lacking on that offensive line, and we saw that. The kid Stone that Earl Mitchell was just eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner it isn't really even a rosterable player. So it's really good to see that Jordan Phillips and Mitchell just dominated him, because that's what they should be doing. In general, though, I was defensively, it was just really weird to see Matt Ryan look like Matt Moore.
Yeah.
Like I almost wonder if like they swapped jerseys before the game because he was completely useless. I mean, like, he was missing 5 yard out routes, which is so weird for him. But that's going to be the effect that the Dolphins' defensive line has on opponents this year. So that was excellent. Like outside of like we couldn't even really evaluate the secondary because that defensive line was just so relentless. Um,
Mm.
so that was a super positive, but just complete opposite on offense. I thought that was a team as far as like the Falcons. I thought they were very vulnerable to a team like Miami. Um, Miami would get things going, rolling a little bit, and then they would just kind of have a big mistake or they would have a drop. And I think that was kind of reminiscent of last year before the offense started clicking a little bit more, especially early in the season. It's not like a huge concern, but it's something that like you were really hoping to see this offense continue to really set the tone because the first two games, I mean, if they were playing Carolina, that would have been a blowout. In a regular season game, they were on pace for a blowout. So like that's kind of what you want to see, especially with some weak opponents early in the season. So it wasn't an impressive game from the offensive standpoint, which that's really the side that we really wanted to see kind of more of an impressive performance.
Do
I
you
mean, I
think?
think also, if you look at the way the Dolphins are going to play this season, those type of games could happen during the regular season, even where the defense just absolutely smothers the opponent, and the offense really doesn't have to do much. I mean, I think when you look at teams like Washington and Jacksonville, and even depending on how Buffalo's quarterback situation, I mean, how Taylor does, when you look at that, the Dolphins could end up winning games with 14 to 20 points and allowing, under 14 points.
Yeah, but that's not something you would prefer to see.
That's right, exactly. But I mean, a lot of times based on the offensive line, it's not going to be a product we prefer to see when we're playing teams like Buffalo. It's entirely possible that we get into ugly situations with teams like that.
But here's the thing, though. Okay, I want to ask: do you guys think that maybe because remember there was a huge outcry that they didn't even want Tannehill to play. Like, don't even let him sniff the field. Let Matt Moore be the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, because they don't want Tannehill to get hurt. So, do you think that maybe to compensate for the fact that our offensive line was not projected to put real starters out there that normally would be starting in their correct positions, do you think they compensated by making the play calling even more conservative than usual with their play calling, their choices of what to do in certain situations? Do you think maybe that had something to do with the performance?
Yes, it's 100%. I mean, you saw the most basic of route trees coming out of those receivers early in the game. I mean, they didn't want anything to go wrong. And in the third preseason game, you don't sit your starting quarterback. It's just not how it works. I mean, I think the only team that did, I don't think Aaron Rodgers played this week, but after Jordy Nelson, after what happened, and after Aaron Rodgers' public comments, I don't think you can blame them. But I think you're entirely right that they kind of watered down the playbook.
How about you, Efren?
Sorry, I was looking something up. I tuned out a little bit, but yeah, sorry, I was looking something up.
Go ahead, Ian, then.
Yeah, I think they definitely did. It was kind of reminiscent of last year after Albert got hurt. It was a lot of dink and dunk. Um, and kind of like you mentioned, it's going to be vanilla anyway because it's preseason. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, bear that in mind anyways. They're not going to show a whole lot. Obviously, we really want to see them be more aggressive. We want to see them push the ball, but it's just not probably going to happen preseason. So it may not have been realistic to hope for that.
How many starters do you guys think are going to come out on Thursday night against Tampa? Do you think any or not really?
I'd say
One.
the
Billy
guards. Yeah, I'd say guards and maybe Juwan James. On
Chris
offense.
McCain will be out there a bit, I think. And I don't know if you guys view him as a starter
Does
or
he
not.
qualify as a starter? I don't know anymore.
I don't know.
According to the depth chart, yes, but
The depth chart's a list.
Yeah.
right. Alphabetical order preferred.
Yeah, he's been playing really late in games. He got like 9 snaps or something one of the first weeks before he got hurt. So It'd be really surprising if
He was in the
started.
fourth. He was in the fourth quarter. I mean, deep in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, which is
The other
barely
night.
rosterable. Yeah, which tells you he's barely
Right.
rosterable. So, which is I think is fair as far as how he's played.
It's weird though. I last year I saw an incredible amount of fire. It's like I saw the same thing that I saw in Jarvis Landry when I was watching him in training camp. I saw Jarvis the first in his rookie year, and I thought that guy wants to be elite, and
Right.
he wants nothing more than to be that. And I saw the same thing in Chris McCain in his rookie year, but suddenly it just seems like there's something off. Something's not right.
Maybe he just got complacent. I mean, last year he was an undrafted player. He was fighting for, he was fighting for everything. Came out in week 1 and we really saw it. He made a few plays against the Patriots. And then, a lot of people coming into this offseason, he had the hype. I mean, people said, could Chris McCain end up being a starter, this and that? And maybe he got complacent, and maybe that's what it takes for him. Maybe it takes a serious fire underneath him to get that motor, because that's what he did really well last season. He finished plays.
I don't think necessarily that he was complacent as much. I think he's a little overwhelmed because they're giving him a lot to do now, and they're putting a lot of responsibility on his back. So, we got to keep in mind this kid is undrafted. He's in his second year. He doesn't have a lot of playing time experience as far as starting and taking control of the linebacker unit. So I could see it doesn't surprise me that he's not running at 100% right now. But I think that once the season rolls around, because I know he has it in him, I've seen him do some amazing things. But I mean, he got really messed up when he first came into the game on Saturday, where Matt Ryan had a play action pass and he bit so bad, and he had a clear shot at Matt Ryan, and I think it could have been a safety, but he whiffed completely. And it's stuff like that, these big mistakes that are going to hurt him. So I'm glad he's getting the time.
Team-wise, I even think, we run the 4-3, and I think he's good coming off the edge in that. I think almost in the perfectly optimal situation, I think Chris McCain would pass rushing 3-4 defensive end, because his coverage ability and, like you said, that decision-making is lacking. And I think he might benefit from being, I mean, if you guys remember Cameron Wake's first years, when we were in the 3-4 and he was a linebacker, I think the reverse could be true, and I think McCain would benefit more from having his hand in the dirt and letting us just use him as an explosive pass rusher, which is what he is.
The way I see it is quite simply, if you have to have a fire lit under you, you don't have a fire in you. I can pretty much guarantee that Jarvis Landry never needs to have a fire lit under him because he'll light it himself. He has it already. If McCain needs a fire lit under him, then I don't know how much of a fire he has in him, because maybe I don't know. Maybe it died out after his rookie year, because I got to be honest. Like, I went to every single practice, and it's like it wasn't the same McCain that I saw in his first year. And I understand that he's getting told to do a lot more now. But it was last year he said he didn't understand the playbook. So what was he playing on? Instinct? And it was this offseason that now he supposedly does know the playbook, and now he's worse? It doesn't make much sense to me.
I think maybe like Efren was saying, they can just take it at that point when he's a rookie and he doesn't know the playbook and say, just get after it. And say, there's the quarterback, now go get him. And then when you ask him to be a decision maker and play in coverage his second year, that's when the glaring holes in his game show up. And I think you're entirely right about the motor, what you were saying, about that he has to have that instinctively.
Yeah, and if you go back to college, that's a big reason why he had issues in college and then went undrafted. Is one, he was really tall and lanky out of college. He was 6'6", 220 pounds. He was he tested really well as an athlete, but adding 40 pounds, I'm not sure. He's kind of a tweener because he's not super bendy, he's not super twitchy. We've seen him in coverage. He's not overly good in coverage because it's not something he's ever done before. So that was definitely not coming out. And then also his attitude / dedication to the game was another big thing. And at least from what we've heard from other people. And I think that's what you're seeing. And he just seems like a very unfocused player.
I saw him in college once. I was watching, I think it was either against SC or Arizona, where he came in full speed, and then the left tackle shifted over to go block him and hit him, and he just went just on his back. I mean, you're totally right, Ian, about in college he was skinny and he passed the athlete test, but you're right, he was, I mean, I saw him get just completely annihilated on a couple plays. And then, I mean, he popped back up, and for a while early on with the Dolphins, I didn't even realize it was the same player.
He looks big out there now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was looking at him. He was standing next to some other guys, and at first I didn't recognize him.
I think he's
So,
added, like,
I was at the game with my mom, and my mom goes, "Wow, that guy's big." Looking at Chris McCain, I was like, "Yeah, that is a big man."
Did she not see Ndamukong Suh?
No, then I pointed her in the direction of the offensive lineman.
It's like, oh, he's small.
Right, exactly. Oh yeah, he's one of the tiny ones.
That's kind of how it works around here. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned the offensive lineman, Max, because that's where we're going to be transitioning into next. Specifically, one, Dallas Thomas. And Ian, you and I went back and forth real briefly on Twitter yesterday about this, and we kind of have some differing views on what we consider to be a good or bad performance for Dallas Thomas. And I'm just going to hopefully live here I can give my explanation a little bit better than the usual 140 characters back and forth. That's never really good for that's good for
nobody. That's not good for the sports world.
not good for in-depth discussion. So the way I see it is, like, I watched the whole game and I was live tweeting everything, so I didn't really have a chance to analyze everything really deeply, but if I'm watching the game and I'm tweeting things out, and I did try to make a concerted effort to watch what Dallas was doing at left tackle, but what I'm thinking is that if I didn't have to notice that he made a mistake, and I did notice a couple of times that he messed up, but I mean, I have to look at it like this. It's kind of a circumstantial thing. Right now, he went back to left tackle for one game, a position he hasn't been practicing all throughout the training camp. He's been nailed in at left guard, where he should have been in the first place, but we'll not go into that. He had Jamil Douglas next to him, who he had actually beaten out pretty much for the left guard position, so he wasn't getting any help there. Then J.D. Walton eventually comes in to take over as center, so I'm not going to use that as an excuse, but it certainly doesn't help him. And if he only made 3 or 4 mistakes, and I understand it was only one half, but I look at it like this: like, there were how many snaps for the offense, and if it's only 4 or 3 or 4, I expected it to be every single play he was getting absolutely ramrodded, he was getting destroyed, he was getting knocked over.
He was a revolving door last year.
He was a revolving door. But this time he wasn't. He wasn't a revolving door, and for the most part he was able to hold his own. Most of the mistakes that came on the offensive line I didn't see coming from the direction of Dallas Thomas. In fact, there are a few plays where he was really, really good doing what he was doing, and he
was downfield blocking on one play, and I actually stood up out of my seat and said, "Who was that?"
And then
I looked up, and it was Dallas Thomas, and I sat back down and questioned everything about this world.
So that's the way I think it is. Like, yes, he made mistakes, but he also did some really good things. So overall, as a whole performance, I can't really say that he was bad. He was, for considering who he is, what he does, what his reputation is, he was pretty good. And Tannehill didn't take that many hits. He messed up. You pointed out, Ian, one sack that he took, and okay, I'll give you that one. And there were obviously other mistakes that he made, but as a whole, I don't give him a bad grade for his performance at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and you're right. I mean, compared to the right side last year, which was a position he's never played, he at least has experience on the left side. So it wasn't surprising for me to see him do better on the left side, and that was encouraging. Like, to just kind of like give perspective, I would put Dallas Thomas comfortably ahead Jason Fox on the roster. Like, he played better than Jason Fox did at any point in this preseason. What still bothers me about Thomas, and the way I kind of look at it is two different things. Is I look at a performance from in that player's shoes, like, so how's that performance compared to him, and then how's that performance on like a macro level, saying, okay, well, how is he compared to where he needs to be at from like a league standpoint? Because he may be the starting left tackle the first few weeks, depending on what's going on with Albert. So, it's it's still a matter of accountability. Like it's still your job, and he is in a tough spot because it is his first action at left tackle. Um, but what I kept coming back to is just situational football, where when he loses, it's crippling, and especially the one where it was a strip sack. He gave up a hurry, he gave up a sack, and then obviously on a couple run plays, one especially, it was like a 4 or 5 yard loss, and it effectively ended the drive. And I think that's where just kind of, and then that's only one half of football, and we've seen it with Bryant McKinney, we've seen it with Jonathan Martin a couple years ago, Richie Incognito missing blocks, like that stuff just piles up quickly. And you've got a struggling right tackle in Juwan James. You've got, an unsettled guard situation a little bit, although the guards have been good this year. I think the preseason has shown, Douglas, Thomas, and Turner, they've got 3 playable guards, and they're going to be upgraded over last year. But overall, though, I mean, with Thomas's performance, like, was he horrible? No. No, I don't think he was horrible. He wasn't a train wreck. But I can't dismiss the really bad plays because they were, when you're on an island at left tackle, like the one thing that you can't do is you can't give up the inside position. And what really bothered me on the strip sack was how he instantly gave up the inside position, which is the shortest route to the quarterback. Like there's nothing the quarterback can do can get away from that unless if he breaks some tackle like Ben Roethlisberger, which that's 99% of the time not going to happen because Ben Roethlisberger's a freak. But so it's just those kind of mistakes, and unless if he gets more action next week, it was just like that was his opportunity to kind of iron out those weaknesses. And so like it's good that it happens now. Those mistakes happen now, but it's just I don't think. Yes, in terms of like Dallas Thomas play compared to right tackle, it was better, and the good plays were good. Like they were actually positive plays that he made, which I think is a negative compared to last year. Last year was just mostly like he was surviving and then he was having horrible plays. At guard though, he's a pretty decent guard, so I don't, I'm not too worried about him at guard. But at tackle, obviously, you're looking for more good plays than even just surviving plays, and he had that. So the positives were there. But the drive killers are just they're still so bad, and 3 1/2. I mean, that's 3 drives in 1/2 that you can't get back. And it could have been a fumble, and on the strip sack, it could have gone the other way. Atlanta could have gotten that. So it's just one of those things where I can't give him even like an average grade when you've effectively killed 3 drives in 1/2, because then extrapolate that to a full game, and you're looking at half of your possessions were ended because of one player's incompetency.
So essentially you're saying is that your evaluation is not necessarily based on how many mistakes he did, but rather the results of said mistakes.
Yes and no. Go back to last year, and like you can't be losing as much as like Darren College did, or Thomas did at right tackle. Like it's a mixture of both. Like you can't consistently get your butt kicked on every single drive, but it makes it worse that how quickly and how badly he lost. Like for example, if you would have maybe taken the sack out, I think the sack was what really bothered me, is because like it was just so bad as far as like a technique standpoint that it was like he just didn't. It's like he forgot where he was, and it allowed a potential turnover. So I think a bit of it is result based, but also just in terms of like that can swing a game, in a drop of a dime. So it's kind of both things. Like you can't make critical errors. Everyone's going to lose. It's not a matter of if you're going to lose. It's a matter of when you're going to lose and how badly you're going to lose. So you just can't be on like the extremes of either of those.
It's a matter of like what we thought it was going to be and what it should be. Because if we look at what we thought it was going to be, then we're looking at Dallas Thomas's performance and giving it a really positive grade. But if we're looking at what it should be, then we're saying, well, we're still a little ways away. But I mean, I think the problem I think we just kind of let it snowball. I think people got dramatic over it because they wanted Evan Mathis, and I think people got dramatic over it because they thought it was going to be the end of the team, that we struggled a little bit at guard. But I think, and a lot of people don't realize how many positions Dallas Thomas was trying to play last season. But I think when you look at last night's game, I think, Ian, you're totally right that it's those drive killers. And you look at how the Dolphins did last season, and those single drives made the difference. You look at Green Bay, you look at Detroit, you look at Denver, those games that we could have won, and if he gives up that one sack, exactly like you're saying, just with the poor technique, then it could cost us those games. And it all comes down to the little details, but it definitely is better than what we thought Dallas Thomas was going to be this year.
Well, considering what we thought Dallas Thomas was going to be when we first started the preseason,
Right, exactly.
we thought he was going to be a train wreck and he was going to get cut, not turn into a starter.
Right.
And, in that game, Jamil Douglas and Billy Turner weren't helping him out very much either.
Jamil Douglas. Turner played okay. Jamil Douglas was abysmal.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I had some high hopes for him because I thought when he got into an NFL weight room working with those guys, I thought it would sharpen him a little bit. But that was not.
Yeah,
it's interesting you guys have that because I thought the only two mistakes he had were more of communication errors. And that kind of comes from working with Walton and then also a new left tackle. So
that's very true. I think I
probably never practiced with those guys.
You're entirely right about that.
Yeah, because
it's a new personnel grouping.
Yeah, especially the one pressure that he gave up, it just looked like they didn't know who was taking who, and it just kind of no one grabbed the guy right over in between the C gap between Douglas and Thomas. So I attributed that one to just a mental mistake between the two.
And you look at J.D. Walton, you see how J.D. Walton played, because where is he now?
Yeah, he's awful. He was awful before Miami picked him.
I don't know why they brought him on. That was the biggest what the crap moment I've ever seen. Okay, he started every game he's ever played, and he was terrible in every game he ever played. How does that manage to become a starter? I really don't get it.
He negated that awesome run.
Bodies, just having bodies who have experience, who can snap to the back.
He started in his rookie year, Max.
Right.
That's not experience.
Well, it's more experience than if we had picked up an undrafted rookie free agent. We didn't have a center, and we could get him for, like we said, he was a training camp guy. But, he was bad last night. A few nights ago, he was bad.
Just as soon as he came in, he got on his very first play, he got a flag that negated Lamar.
Yeah.
Miller.
What was the flag? I forget what it was.
I don't remember what it was either. Chop block.
Chop block.
Because you can't go in between their legs with a chop block. It has to be directly in front. And he just, I don't know. He just so unathletic and just ridiculous.
He executed a blocking maneuver that we've never seen from the human race.
That's why J.D. Walton's not on the team anymore. So let's just let's go in general just for a second here. Are you based on what we've already seen? Are you guys concerned really about the starting offensive line? Never mind the depth. I understand the depth is a problem, and it's going to be a problem.
It's a problem
just
everywhere
as
we go.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. We're magnifying. I think we magnify that problem because we look at the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find a hole somewhere, and it's depth.
Yeah. There's 8 or 9 good offensive lines across the league.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Once you're done with the good offensive lines, it just turns total dumpster fire.
And then you look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh loses one guy. They lose Marquise Pouncey. And then the unit dissolves.
Right. Same for the Browns last year too.
Right.
So it's literally impossible. There's only one team. Pittsburgh developed this Alejandro Villanueva kid at tackle. He was a tight end at Army, and then he did his tours of duty, and then went to Philadelphia last year. He was 245 pounds a year ago. Well, he shows up this year and he's 340 pounds, and he adds 100 pounds in a year, and he's been an excellent tackle for them. So they're the only team with an actual decent backup tackle. Someone should actually trade a day 2 pick for him. So don't be too concerned about offensive line depth because no one has it. It's just everyone's moving to the defensive side of the ball whenever they're really athletic or they're moving to different positions.
And Lazer's offense supports bad offensive line play because you can get the ball out so quickly.
Yeah. And they've got John Benton, who is one of the best offensive line coaches in the world. So when he makes a decision to go with one of these guys, I give him trust. Like I'm willing to just say, okay, if you feel like that's the right move, okay. If it doesn't work out, we're still gonna be critical of the players, but I mean, Miami's done what they can to really improve that unit as best they can, outside of getting, like La'el Collins or something. But that's really, and they tried. So it's like they've really tried to make that unit better through coaching and through personnel.
Right, and I mean when you look at it's a really hard position to look at. It's a hard position to scout a lot of the times in practice, especially with the views that we get from practice based on just where they place everyone. But so like you were saying about the coach, I mean, we got to go with it. And I think if you look at that unit and you say Brandon Albert, Dallas Thomas, Pouncey, and then Billy Turner and Juwan James, that doesn't give me nightmares. That I'm totally okay with that. I mean, I'm even partially in favor of letting Brandon Albert wait until week 3 to come back, regardless of where he thinks he is. Because, I mean, you look at Washington. Washington's a first overall pick candidate.
Washington's a dumpster fire.
Washington could be the worst team in the NFL. We drew a great card this season. We play some bad teams, and we get to play them on the road. We get to bring the good teams into our stadium. Dallas and Indianapolis and Baltimore. But teams like Washington and Jacksonville, we can play without Brandon Albert. And I think that it makes sense to give him, if that extra 2 weeks makes, 7% of a difference for him, then it might be worth it to give it to him. And I think the offensive line, I'm back to what your original question about our concern of the overall unit. Concern, yes, but panic, no.
So you're not on the we should have signed Evan Mathis and we're gonna go 0-16 without him.
You know where I stand on Evan Mathis. I don't think we should have signed him. I think if something could happen for Andy Levitre in the next 2 weeks, because he was really solid, and I think it could be a scheme issue in Tennessee, whatever's going on there, that he's not playing. But I think it's worth bringing him in. I mean, if we can give up, a couple of day 3 draft picks, if it's a 6th, if it's like a 5th, and then a conditional 6th or 7th, whatever it is, then we can do it. Because I think Andy Levitre would help improve the team.
Well, so he would probably improve the team the way Evan Mathis would improve. Well, not exactly like Evan Mathis.
But Evan Mathis would then prevent us from going out and making other moves. I think Andy Levitre would be a lot friendlier to the cap.
How much would you pay for Levitre?
I can look up right now what his current contract is, but I mean, probably based on what he's on, the reason they're looking to possibly trade him is not because of cap issues. It's just because he's not playing. I mean, what Mathis got from Denver, it would have been fine, obviously, this year. I mean, Levitre, looking at his salary cap numbers, he's making too much. I mean, we couldn't get him at his current rate. We would have to take a pay cut, but if it goes between getting benched and not playing in Tennessee and being able to play in Miami, I think he would take the pay cut. And it depends on how his contract works out. I mean, if they could renegotiate, that it all comes down to that. But really, at the end of the day, I think your question is, it's really indicative of what the main focus this offseason has been between Evan Mathis and all these guys who are potential solutions. And I don't think that it's as bad as people thought. Like Ian was saying, there are bad plays that are going to cost us over the course of the season, but I don't think it's an apocalyptic scenario if we have to roll with the guys we have week 1.
No. The worst positional group on the team, I think, is linebacker.
Yup.
Like, everyone's worried about offensive line.
Agreed.
Kelvin Shepard. I mean, when you originally asked about, what did we see that stood out the other night, I was going to say Jelani Jenkins because I think he had a really good game and I think he's playing well. But unfortunately, he's playing at a spot within the linebacker group that isn't going to solve any problems for us because Kelvin Shepard is who Kelvin Shepard is, and I don't think that's going to be very good for us this season.
If it were you guys, who's in the middle, Misi or Shepard?
Misi.
And so if it's Misi, you're willing to go roll with McCain at the strong side?
I don't know what I'd be willing to do at the strong side. All I know is that watching Kelvin Shepard drop in coverage, I'd suit up and go out there at outside linebacker if it meant we could start McCain inside.
I'd put Vigal. I'd actually start Vigal, and then
Vigil, is that how you say it? I thought it was Vigil.
I'm not sure. I'm not 100%. I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it everywhere. I've also heard, is it Fide or Feed? Terrence Feed. I think it's Feed.
Today.
I'm pretty sure it's Fade.
Today.
Fide,
Yeah.
gotcha. So yeah, I mean, I think you're entirely right that we could roll with Vigil outside. I mean, we could even take a shot at flip-flopping. I mean, it's too late to do it now. We could have flip-flopped the whole thing, put Jelani Jenkins strong side, maybe had Vigil play weak side, and Misi in the middle. Whatever it is, just anything to keep Kelvin Shepherd out of the lineup.
Yeah.
He's the new Dallas Thomas for me.
I think Vigil has done like just enough to make me trust him a little more than I thought I could going into the offseason. He's really surprised me. And in the second preseason game, he had some real big plays. I didn't see too much of him on Saturday. I didn't get all the way through the game.
He was doing. I mean, it's now just become he does what we've seen him do the first two games. I mean, he's just in on every tackle. He's in. He knows. He has a really, really the most impressive thing. It's nothing he's doing physically. It's how he's been able to digest the playbook and digest game film because he knows what's happening and he knows where the play is going to be and he manages to get there and help. You know, he's not going to make some stellar open field tackle because physicality is not his gift. Mm-hmm. His gift is how he understands the game and plays in that sense. And I think, I mean, what we've seen him do in terms of digesting it is really impressive. Like you were saying, Efren, like, I mean, as an undrafted rookie out of Utah State, being able to come in and digest the way he has and work. I mean, obviously he hasn't been playing against starters, but I think I gave him a lot of credit initially as a special teams guy because we were awful last year on special teams, and I think guys like I think he and Mike Hull have both helped on special teams. But it would be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Kelvin Shepherd because I don't think he's what we need.
If we're discussing Vigil, Ian, you're a draft guy primarily, so let me ask you this. Would you say it's a fair criticism to say that Vigil's weakness is in coverage as well, which is kind of the problem why we can't let him play now?
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate, though, that they didn't give him a chance earlier because he's not – I didn't think he was as bad as, like, Shepard's. Like, Shepard is kind of like Philip Wheeler, where, like, you don't want him anything near that. He's probably more similar to Misi, where he's just kind of like physically limited. But the positive to Vigil as opposed to Misi and even like the rest of the linebackers outside of Jenkins is he doesn't miss tackles. Every tackle he's had this preseason, he hasn't missed one. So like you're getting consistency. You're getting a guy that can at least make it.
The technique is so impressive. His tackling technique he's been able to develop so early is so impressive. You're entirely right about that.
Yeah, and like it's surprising that he went undrafted because he probably should have been like an early day 3 type of guy. So, I mean, I just wish they would have given him an opportunity sooner because I think they're just wasting time on Shepard. I think Misi in the middle, we've seen that. That's an issue. It's going to be a lot of crossing routes again this year, and there's really nothing they can do about it as long as Misi's in there. It's just he's a little too limited for it. It's just it's a position they're going to be looking at in the draft next year. Unless if Vigil they give him a chance, like they gave like Jenkins a chance a year ago. So it's.
Are you more worried about Misi or Shepard?
Both. Because I mean, here's the thing: like Misi, because what they do with Jenkins is they move from weak side to strong side on any given play. Like
yeah, exactly. He has flexibility.
Yeah, and like he's going to be fine. Like I'm not worried about Jenkins at all. But like you have to have another linebacker on the field because going 3 safeties is going to be smart. But it's really difficult because Misi's the play caller. So, like, you have to pass that off to Rashad Jones.
This is going to put pressure. I was just about to say earlier, this puts a ton of pressure on Rashad Jones coming up and making plays. I mean, I think they're going to put Rashad Jones in the box. Rashad Jones is going to be in the box a ton this season.
Yeah, and he's fantastic at it. Like, the thing that he really excels at is, like, crashing down from the high safety position at the perfect time. And he's just incredible. Like, he's played something like, I don't know, like 6 or 10 run snaps. And he's made the stop on half of them, coming down from the box or coming down from like the high safety position before the snap. So like he's impossible to account for as in like an offense. But it's just the problem is that if you've got Misi off the field and you're playing an extra safety back there instead, it's just you just have a ton of pressure on Jones. And then if Jones gets hurt, God forbid, it's just there's really not much else there that you can really fix that with. So I mean, it's a huge responsibility jump for him too to go from Misi playing, calling plays. I think Misi's ideal spot is Sam. I mean, you move him to strong side linebacker, and he can do an adequate job there. Like, we know that. But in the inside, he's just so limited as far as diagnosing and reading and then executing, shedding blocks. And then again in coverage, like he's just a below average middle linebacker, and it's really hard to not give someone else a chance when they could possibly be a little bit better.
And I think we lost in all the excitement this offseason, all the positives. I think we lost one of the main negatives is what Dion Jordan would have been able to do at that position potentially this season and what he would have meant. I mean, because he ended up being kind of the reverse when he came in. I thought he looked okay in coverage at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did.
I thought he looked good. And I mean, we all thought he was going to be kind of what Chris McCain ended up being, where it was pass rush but no coverage. And I mean, Dion Jordan.
Think that.
I thought he was going to end up doing better in pass rush because I thought he was going to get intimidated because of the way the Oregon defense simplified everything for him. I didn't think that in college. I personally thought that when he got to the NFL, they were going to use him in a pass rush package. But now it shifted the entire unit. And I mean, Dion Jordan not being able to play now means Misi has to move outside and Shepard gets put inside. And Jelani Jenkins, he's the one mainstay because I think we've all said it. We all agree that he could be good for Miami this year, and he could end up really panning out as a draft pick.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that the Dolphins are going to just go with Shepard based off, hey, he was there last year and none of the other guys are stepping up as much as we want
feels
to.
About veterans.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the biggest thing because if it's me, I'm letting Vigil just go on in there. Let the rookie play. Shepard's just a rental at this point. I don't see why they're bringing him around.
No more, no less from Shepard. Mm-hmm. You just know what he's going to be.
But there's not a whole lot you're getting from Shepard.
Exactly.
So.
That's not a good thing. I'm saying it's not a good thing because Zach Vigil, I mean, he could come out this year and he could have some bad plays, but that's just going to mean he's going to be better next season, and it's going to be a draft pick saved on another linebacker that we can use somewhere else.
It's such an important part on the defense, though, that I don't think they want to take that risk. You're asking for a lot from a very inexperienced kid, and I think that's why they're going to end up rolling out Shepard to start the season. The season might not end that way. But.
Miles Jack 2016, I'm saying it right now.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, you let the rookie play. We let Ryan Tannehill. We threw Ryan Tannehill into the fire, and if it had been up to Philbin his first year, it would have been David Garrard, and that just let the rookie play. If he can't handle the beating, then he's not strong enough mentally. I don't think. Like if you're demoralized and it ruins your whole NFL career because I couldn't do it in my rookie year, what it should do is it should cause you to want to become better. It should make you work harder. It should make you want to become faster, stronger.
That could be Dallas Thomas.
That's what happened with Ryan Tannehill. That's what appears to be happening with Dallas Thomas. I think Dallas Thomas is just tired of hearing the crap said about him. But
and I mean, I've got to say, I know I have to admit that I was a part of that. I mean, I really was hard on Dallas Thomas.
Oh, dude, you couldn't find a bigger Dallas
Thomas.
I
know. Oh, trust me, I know. You, and to your respect, I mean, and to a lot of people on Dolphins Twitter, a lot of people can't move on and they can't change. And I think we've got to extend the exact same courtesy to Dallas Thomas that we do to Ryan Tannehill. To say that this guy has every chance in the world of being better his second year than he was his first year. And, I mean, obviously, it's a totally different scenario. But, I mean, it just shows the double standard that we're looking at a little bit. And I think Dallas Thomas could improve. I think he could, like we were saying, and it's like got to go with the young guy. And I think that's what we did with Dallas Thomas last year. And it could end up paying off this year if he improves. If like you were saying, that he's tired of hearing what's said about him and he wants to improve his game.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's the only difference here is that you can give this guy a chance at the chance, but the chances have to be with him trending up. Tannehill is trending up. If Thomas is flatlining and then suddenly goes up, that can be an excuse as to why it took so long for people to finally. It's like you're going to get tired of him if it seems like there's been pretty much no improvement, and then suddenly it's like he's back up there. Tannehill has been steadily going up, so the patience brigade, as we're often called, can have some kind of reason for saying what we say. We're saying he's getting better, because it's true. Thomas only recently made a visible improvement. Like, maybe it was bits and pieces here and there, and the coaching staff themselves have admitted that they kind of messed with Thomas a lot because they kept trying to move him around and try to turn it into Nate Garner 2.0, which is not going to work. That's exactly what
I was going to say. You're entirely right. I mean, this is the first time we've seen him settle down at a position for training camp. I mean, they moved him. I know you and I were equally concerned when they moved him to left tackle. And we said, what's going to happen to this guy? Because last season, that's what his downfall was. I mean, like, it was like, oh, great, we got him in a position where it looks like he's making some strides, and now we're going to shift him back over. But I mean, he ended up looking good last night, but the other night, depending on who you ask. But,
well, he looked okay.
Right, depending on who you ask. He looked okay.
Let's compromise.
For Dallas Thomas, okay. the eternal asterisk is for Dallas Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, if he just keeps playing the way he's playing, because a lot of people, even with what he's been able to do in preseason, people aren't buying it because it's not a real NFL game. It doesn't count. So I don't see that logic. I understand that preseason games don't technically count towards your record, but it's not like they're out there playing at half speed. They're hitting each other. They want to win the game. I can't imagine that you're going in there and you're just like, whatever. If that's the case, then you have a problem beyond your ability. You have a problem with your passion.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's very hard to find a way to correctly value the preseason. People overvalue it, people undervalue it, but I mean, when we're looking at it, like we were saying, it's a good time to look and just see what's generally working and what isn't, and not necessarily to draw conclusions. And we can say without drawing a firm conclusion that Dallas Thomas is trending in a positive direction, and the linebackers are not, with the exception of Jelani Jenkins and some of the younger guys who we know Kevin Coyle won't play.
All right, so let's transition a little bit here, because we've been talking back and forth about that this whole time now. We have the recent list of first cuts that the Dolphins have made have come up now, and let me just pull that list up right here. So let me just pull this up now so I can read the list. I know the biggest surprises, just for me, were tight end Jarrell Robinson and wide receiver LaRon Byrd, because while those guys weren't overly impressive, they were better than a lot of the players that have not yet been cut. Like, let's say Christian Jones at wide receiver. Like, he's doing okay as a returner, but as a wide receiver, which is where he's actually going to be, then he really hasn't done much of anything. So the actual list as follows is defensive tackle Calvin Barnett, guard Bryant Browning, LaRon Byrd, Kevin Cohn is gone, wide receiver, defensive end Ray Drew, wide receiver Tyler McDonald, who was already cut once before and got brought back, defensive end Kendall Montgomery, tight end Jarrell Robinson, cornerback Sammy Seamster, safety Phillip Thomas, and of course center J.D. Walton. So the only real surprises on that list for me were Byrd and McDonald and Robinson. More so Robinson, because as far as I was aware, he was actually the favorite to win the third tight end spot, because he's, like, for one thing, he made a play in the second preseason game that nobody else did anything like that. He did a real long catch and run for a touchdown, and that's something that neither Samish nor Stoneburner can say about themselves. They haven't done really much of anything to prove that they're better. So unless
Stoneburner was ugly in the first game. Stoneburner in the first preseason game had some drops. I mean, he was not even just average. He was below average, but I mean, he has improved. And yeah, that was very, very surprising for me to see Jarrell Robinson cut first.
It's like, if anything, I would have expected it to be Tim Samish, because Stoneburner at least was there last year. And I don't know, maybe if they're just hoping against hope that 6'8" frame of his will eventually become something good. Because, I mean, let's face it, how many 6'8" guys do you see in the NFL that aren't on defense? How many 6'8" guys do you see in the NFL, period? They're usually playing basketball or something like that. So,
I don't think the third tight end was ever on this roster. I think they'll probably pick somebody else up.
That's what I thought. I mean, I thought looking at it, I thought they were either going to end up moving on from all of them, or
Yeah.
I mean, maybe going with Jarrell Robinson just to the upside. The only reason I could see them even possibly going with Stoneburner is that he's a better blocker than Robinson is, if for that reason.
Which
But
they don't have. They don't really have like a blocking tight end either, because Sims.
Right. I mean, Sims is close, but he's not.
Kind of okay. Yeah, he's a kind of like adequate, but and they may have cut these guys now for like practice squad, because like I know that they weren't final cuts, but like Robinson, Seamster was kind of surprising to me. I would watch those guys and Bird. Like I would watch those guys for the practice squad more than anything, because those guys are kind of a little bit different than the skill set that they have on the active roster.
I was surprised they cut. I was very surprised that they went with cutting Kevin Cohn and LaRon Bird over, I mean, DeMar Altman, like you were saying, Christian Jones. And, I mean, I think it's unfortunate because those guys are just kind of in roster purgatory because we know who the 6 wide receivers are going to be.
Right.
But
assuming they even keep that many, Hazel may not make it.
I think Hazel makes it just because they're too scared to lose him, because he wouldn't make it to the practice squad. He would get claimed.
Yeah.
And so I think Hazel might make it for the same reason that, Lippett could make it, because Lippett wouldn't make it to the practice squad.
You don't think so?
No, he would get claimed. He would get claimed
as a wide receiver, if not a corner.
Right,
sure.
right, exactly. Just for when you look at guys who can go out there on game day, a lot of times what teams look for, you can only dress a certain number of players. So if you've got a guy who, if there was, knock on wood, some kind of catastrophe at wide receiver and 3 guys go down in a game and you grab Tony Lippett off the bench and say, you got to do this, he could come in and play a little bit of wide receiver with some basic routes. I mean, it's an advantage like that a lot of NFL teams want. I don't think Tony Lippett would make it to the practice squad. And so I think there's a dilemma at corner for who to go with. But yeah, I'm very surprised at the wide receiver and tight end cuts.
Well, I think the difference here is that I guess what it is that we're looking at a situation where special teams is coming into play again. We always talk about how this guy's ticket to the roster is their special teams ability, their special teams this, their special teams that. The difference between the 3 wide receivers who did get cut and Altman and Jones, like Max, you mentioned Altman and Jones have both been on special teams duty at one point or another. Altman as a returner, as that's the most that I managed to notice, but he was still on special teams. So I guess what they're looking at is that Altman and Jones offer more than just you're a pure wide receiver. So I guess that's what they're looking at still. They're still trying to evaluate their value on special teams, and God knows the Dolphins need special teams help. They always need special teams help. So I guess that might be why. But if it were still, I really the biggest thing for me again is Jarrell Robinson. You mentioned guys, Ian, you said that you don't think that the 3rd tight end is currently on the roster. Is there anybody that you're keeping an eye on as far as that goes?
Today, Joe Duncan from Denver was cut, and like he was out all of last year with an injury, but he's kind of like a freaky tight end. That I'm surprised that Denver kind of just like gave up on him.
A freaky tight end? Explain.
Yeah, just like athletically, like he's got like the size, speed, like all that you really want from a tight end, that you really want like your hands on as like a coaching staff, because you can kind of mold him. He's just way more physically gifted than anybody else that Miami has had, like as far as like the end of the rotation tight ends. He's definitely like an upside project, but I mean, I would definitely
Vikings cut Brandon Bostic. I mean, he's a free agent.
Do you want that drama right there, because you know how, oh my gosh, he ruined the game for the Packers and all that?
I mean, I think right. I mean, obviously that stays with him a little.
I'm kidding, by the way, but
yeah. But I mean, I think it's just something where you've got to say our guy isn't here clearly, and luckily, I mean, it's not the most crucial. It's not the biggest issue. I mean, if we don't have a solid 3rd tight end, but it's one of those situations where you just look and you say, it would be nice if we can find someone. But I mean, the reason they might go with Stoneburner, like you said, I just don't think Samish makes it. I think he was worth bringing in. I mean, for me, it's 50 Shades of Michael Agnew with the athleticism. I can just hear Jeff Ireland in my mind.
Agnew's available.
Yeah, right. You can't get a guy like this off the street. Like what Jeff Ireland. Well, now you can because you can get Agnew off the street. But
Again.
yeah. And I think that I think it all comes back. It all comes back to who can do the most. And I think on special teams, I think if you're going to get anything out of any of them, it's probably going to be Stoneburner.
I don't know. I saw some things from Stoneburner late last season, but not so much this season. It really was a neck and neck kind of a thing for the three tight ends in camp, in the games, except for when Robinson made that one play. That was pretty much the only time that I noticed somebody saying, looking like, oh, hey, I noticed you.
I thought he was a receiver.
Congratulations.
I thought he was a receiver. I mean, I looked at it.
Was he transitioned from receiver to tight end because of his size or something like that, and he wasn't fast enough?
Yeah, I mean, he's like you said, he's fast enough. I mean, he hit the corner on that play. I mean, he was coming across the field, and he caught it, and then he just beat the guy. I thought he was a receiver. I mean, that was a special play, but it's impossible to say. I think the most interesting thing looking at it's going to be what happens at cornerback. I mean, I thought cutting Seamster now made sense because that was the only obvious guy I thought could really cut. But I mean, now you're looking at a situation where we can't cut Lippett. We can't really cut Bobby McCain. We can't cut Will Davis.
I disagree with that one.
Yeah, my guess is that they probably cut Bowman, who's been pretty average to bad. The reason why I thought they would keep Seamster is because of special teams value.
Yeah.
And he's kind of been like Hickey's obsession the last 2 years because they brought him in before the draft last year. They tried to get him after the draft. They couldn't get him, and then as soon as he became available, they snatched him, and then they obviously got him back this year. So I was kind of surprised at that, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't realize that they had tried so hard to get him before. That's pretty interesting. But Bowman, I just have the lasting impression of him. I don't know if you guys remember in the Giants game last season, Giants-Seahawks, when he made the business decision against Marshawn Lynch. I mean, pretty close to the goal line. Just decided to not even attempt to tackle on him. Just let him walk in. I mean, I'd do the same, but then again, it's not my job to stop him. But I think you're entirely right, Ian, that Zach Bowman is probably going to get the axe.
And there's 2 more to go by tomorrow, so it's going to be interesting to see who's next. It's going to probably happen soon.
Who do you think are going to be the 2 if you had to take a wild guess?
I think Will Davis is getting cut. And, I mean, how many – if we cut Bowman, too, that leaves us at 6 cornerbacks, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's how much they bring in.
I think it could be Kobe Hamilton. I know we just brought him in. I think Kobe Hamilton could go just because it just makes sense when you look at the roster. I mean, I could be one of the quarterbacks. Josh Freeman could very well be Josh Freeman. Because, I mean, Josh Freeman, we can't get onto the practice squad. We could get MBT. I'm glad
And
Bethel Thompson.
it's basically probably going to be people that you don't need to play this week because they may keep guys like Hamilton just so that the other guys don't get hurt.
Right.
So that you can have a functional rotation. Same for Mike Gillisley. I'd be shocked if he is on this roster or practice squad after this year, but you're going to keep him just so that you don't have to play Miller or probably even Damian Williams. You maybe consider keeping him out of the final game.
Right. Demetrius Bronson could get cut. Yeah, and I mean, it could even be. It could be one of the quarterbacks. It won't be one of the special teams guys because I think this last week is going to be the real final evaluator between Matt Darr, Brandon Fields, and then the ultimate battle of the offseason, Andrew Franks and Caleb Sturgis. But I mean, it could be Anthony Johnson. But I think, like Ian was saying, they kind of need him for numbers for Thursday night.
The only thing I can if Darr wins the job over Fields, it's not because Dar is a better punter. It's
No, it's
because
just
they're
money.
looking to save some more money, which I'm not opposed to because after all, I'm not look. Okay, I'm actually gonna bring this up because I am not a capologist. I don't know how the salary cap really works. It's so detailed and so complicated, really, that I'm getting a whole bunch of different descriptions about how it's supposed to work, where the Dolphins really stand in the next couple of years. I honestly don't know how it works, but my basic understanding is we are in serious cap hell next year. That's just my understanding. That seems to be the general consensus. But then I have other people telling me that, oh, we got $20 million in dead money we're going to get back, and we're going to be just fine because of it, or this guy's not going to make it, and that's going to save over more money, rolling over this kind of thing, and we could have signed Mathis and been just fine. I don't know how the cap works, and because of it, it's very difficult for me to make judgments on money situations based on it. Because if I knew if this description of how, oh, we have the 20 million in dead money, we're all going to get that back, and then there's the 10 million plus supposedly that's going to be projected or so for next year, then I would have been like, sure, go get Mathis, why not? It's not going to matter, we're going to get the money back. But I don't know if that's how it works. And as far as I know, Efren, we've discussed it. I don't think between us we have much better of an understanding. Ian, do you have?
Yeah. Do you want me? Yeah. How much do you want me to get into it?
The best
Hey,
question. The best question you can hear in this situation. How much do you want to know?
Explain it. Educate. I don't know how it works. So
Yeah, I can do NBA cap, but that's only 15 people on a roster. So
NBA cap is the richer the owner, the bigger the cap room.
Yeah. NBA, you get a luxury tax. In baseball, there is no tax for anything. Just spend all you want to spend. Football, it's like be under or die.
Pat Riley tax. You can do the Pat Riley tax, but
yeah.
Okay, so I'll bring up the numbers real quick, and then that way I can actually use like a real life example. So like the way it's gonna work is this is like if Miami would have signed Mathis, say even if it was like $2.5 million, that's $2.5 million less that they can roll into the cap next year. So even though it's a 1-year deal, it's not like Madden, where in Madden basically the money just comes off the cap, and yes, it's more like an NBA thing, like it's an expiring cap or it's an expiring deal. It has no bearing on next year, besides the cap hold in the NBA. But anyways, so it would have taken a chunk out of next year's salary cap because Miami right now is sitting at $11 million of cap room. So what they can do is if they don't touch that money, they don't give out any more extensions, they can roll that into next year. Because next year they're sitting at $7 million over the cap. So if they would have signed Mathis, that would have been another $2.5 million that they would be losing toward next year. And they'd be almost basically breaking even, and they'd have to really look at cutting some veterans, probably just restructuring Sue's deal. That's going to be the big part because he's got that monster.
So the rollover just works like that. Like if you have cap this year,
yeah,
you have more money to spend next year.
Yeah, and that's how they had so much money this year. Yeah, that's how they had so much money this year because even though they've had so many spending sprees in the last few years, they keep having money. Like they can restructure Sue next year, and they would still have a considerable amount of money to spend. Now they're not going to have a lot for a big splurge next year. Like if they were to just keep Sue's deal where it's at, they're going to basically have just enough money to do the draft. So that means veterans are going to be looking at pay cuts or just outright releases. Well, I shouldn't say pay cuts, but just restructuring or outright releases. So like they're not in cap hell for next year. Like it's not pretty, but they're easily going to be able to finagle their way to get cap. Like
there's some guys. I mean, Kawamisi. I mean, we could get the cap from Deion Jordan, letting him go. I mean, there are guys where we could get some cap room, and I mean, I don't know a ton, but I know about the dead money scenario. That getting rid of Kawamisi could help a little bit more than it hurts.
Yeah, so like the guys that you're going to be looking at is like, so Jordan Cameron's deal is basically like a 1-and-1. You're going to basically either cut him next year or you're going to extend him.
There's no way we can keep him at $10 million cap next year. We just can't.
Exactly. So you're going to do something with his deal. That's going to get you more money either way. You can restructure Sue and move his money around because he's sitting at $29 million next year. Although my recommendation is almost like Mike Wallace. You just kind of want to like get through that year. Like if you can
Because then it gets a lot
now,
friendlier. I mean, because 2017 Sue's cap hit drops to 15.
Exactly. So if you can just swallow that right now, then that'd be beautiful. But then I would look at veterans. Cameron Wake, I think he's really at risk of either being restructured or if he won't take it, just being released. Brent Grimes, if he doesn't play to like the level that he needs to be at, I think that's a realistic situation where you're looking to either restructure or cut.
And what if Brandon Albert doesn't? What if Brandon Albert doesn't come back healthy? And if Brandon Albert continues to struggle a little bit, I mean, he was good.
Right.
But he hasn't been what we paid for.
He was fantastic last year.
Right, last year. I mean, what we need him healthy. And
and
if
that's
he's not fully healthy,
I think Adrian Peterson broke the normal expected time to come back from an ACL like that.
That people freaked out about that. People freaked out about that, and they don't realize how hard that rehab process is. And also, it is worth saying with Brandon Albert, it wasn't just an ACL; it was the MCL too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like that was one of those nagging injury types. He got his leg rolled up on, so that's not. It's like give him a break.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying to cut Brandon Albert. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just looking at the top guys. I'm looking at the top guys on the team.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at where we could trim. I mean, we're going to save money on Deion Jordan. I mean, he has a $6 million cap hit next year. He won't be on the football team. So I mean, you look, Brandon Fields. Brandon Fields is a $5 million cap hit, 4.5. That's a punter. Greg Jennings is at 5.5.
Right. Like, so here's the money that you're looking at possibly saving next year. Fields would save you $3.5 million. Misi would be 3.7. Jennings would be $4 million. Deion Jordan would be 3.2. So like just by trimming the fat, and I really like Greg Jennings. So like if he plays well, that's not a bad number to have him back at. But if not, if you deem that this young wide receiver crew is ready to flourish without him, you're saving $4 million. So like automatically right there, along with the rollover, you're sitting at $20 million in cap. So like it happens that quickly. And those are all positions that you can fill fairly cheaply. Like you can get a punter anywhere. You can fill a linebacker position in the draft because that's going to be one of your biggest needs. Like Miami's set up pretty well to where cornerback and linebacker is probably going to be their biggest needs next year. You've already got a deep wide receiver group, and Deion Jordan is contributing nothing. So like by basically, like I said, just by cutting the fat a little bit, you're going to be in a good situation. So. And then you're obviously gonna figure out what's going on with Cameron Grimes and Wake, and that could all help.
That's why I don't think Grimes. That's why I don't think Grimes is gonna get cut, just because I think you look at Grimes' cap, and he's got $3 million of. You would have to take the dead money, but it would still end up being about like $6 million of relief.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, then I'd much rather just cut Koamisi and someone else than cut Brent Grimes.
Yeah,
but
it just depends on what
Grimes.
Because if he's in like the second half of last year's form, I don't think you're gonna. Because he's only gonna get to decline. Like. He's so reliant on his physical traits that like he can't overcome it when he slows down. Like once like his decline is going to be really sharp when it happens, and it's just a matter of when. Like hopefully last year was an injury or something, because if not, then like that's kind of a concern.
Last year was he needed new cleats.
Yeah, seriously, yeah, dude was always falling down. But yeah, so like just like kind of come back to like Miami's cap is fine. It's fine. Like they're going to be able to work it out. Yeah, they're going to have to cut veterans next year, but I mean that's the cycle. That's the NFL cycle, so it is what it is. But they're not in a bad situation. But passing on Evan Mathis helps, especially for a position that they didn't really need a lot of extra help. Especially like you mentioned, like Levitre may become available, and honestly, for like probably half the cost. I mean, if he's getting cut this late, it's probably going to be a veteran minimum deal. I think you're probably getting a decent investment there for almost no money.
Okay, so before we go on, and I want to continue this discussion because I have another question regarding the cap, so I needed to do this. But before we continue that, I want to officially introduce the birthday boy, Chad Ronenbaum, to the show. I actually didn't think he was going to join us, but he decided to take some time out of his special day to join us to the show tonight. So welcome on, Chad.
Thanks for having me.
yeah. Thanks for. Okay, so and you said you have an announcement that needs to be made from Mason Ronenbaum?
Yeah, you guys ready?
Okay, let's bring it on.
Kirk Cousins better get ready for a tsunami and earthquake because he's going to get buried.
You better believe it.
That was his announcement for you guys. So.
Well, it's not wrong, that's for sure.
Definitely, that's factually correct. That is non-negotiable.
I did for my birthday. I did wish for a Super Bowl, so we should be golden. So.
Okay.
But what you just told us what it is. It doesn't come true.
Right.
Oh,
Oh no!
I blew it, man.
You blew it, Chad.
According to Vegas, we're in it.
Oh, yeah.
28
According to
28.
Harvard, we're the third best team in the AFC.
I thought they were smart at Harvard.
Do you see
Something like
how many football players do you see coming out of Harvard?
Hey,
We're
the
getting like
Amish rifle. The Amish
Yeah.
rifle.
We are getting a great
Ryan
lineup
Tannehill.
for early schedule, even though a lot of road games. Because, like last year, it seemed like we played like all the top quarterbacks, and this year we start off against like the bottom level quarterbacks. So hopefully
We're
that'll
starting
help
off
us
with backups. It's like Jay Gruden can name Cousins the starter all he wants. RG3's still better than he is.
Kirk
Yeah, I
Cousins
know.
might throw like 4 picks in the first week. It's gonna be beautiful.
All
Well-
to Rashad Jones because he doesn't know what a safety. He doesn't know what the safety position is.
He might make Calvin Shepard look actually decent in coverage.
Oh my god.
Oh my God, the overreactions after week 1 are going to absolutely kill me on Twitter. I mean, people are going to be saying the Dolphins could break 100 sacks.
Hey, with
I'll say-
Rick and Vernon, who knows?
Got to be like the bottom 10 teams in the league right now for lines. So, and and they got a lot of uncertainty quarterback on top of it.
I think Washington's in the bottom 1 team in the league. And line.
That could
The
be.
bottom one. That's a very specific category. So, okay, let's get back to the cap space thing because this is something that I never really fully understood, and since Ian seems to have his seems to know what's going on with this, I wanted to ask you exactly how does the whole dead money work? Because I remember I mentioned this earlier, and I'm not sure how much stock to take into this because he says that the Dolphins have $20 million in dead money, which, as far as I know, is true. How exactly does the dead money work? Is it just like gone forever, or does it get added back to the cap after a certain amount of time?
It just depends on the deal.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It just depends on the deal. So, like, if you cut a contract with 3 years remaining on it, depending on the guarantees in the contract, it can be stretched out over those 3 years. So, like, when they cut Carlos Dansby, for example, like, he had 2 extra years of money on his deal. So you're still paying that right now. And that's just kind of how it works. I mean, that's why restructuring contracts is so dangerous because and really, Don Aponte's done a great job with contracts. Like, I just have to say that. Like, he has done a wonderful job structuring these contracts to get early outs onto these contracts. Like, so, like, within 2 years, the Dolphins can get rid of them for fairly affordable prices. It's a very short-term hurt thing, but long-term, if you just have to get rid of that big salary, it doesn't really. I'd rather pay $2 million. It's basically like a buyout. It's a buyout that kind of just stretches over the course of whatever the deal has. Sometimes it's after, if it's like a 4-year deal, sometimes it may be after that first or second year. An agent should be pushing for guarantees spread out of at least half the deal because that will discourage an early cut. But you may have saw it with like Henry Melton last year. He signed that huge deal, but it was basically a 1-year guaranteed deal, and then after that, the Cowboys could just cut him for nothing, and he ended up being cut after signing like a $50 million contract, and he only got like $8 million of it. So it just all depends on how it's structured, really.
Right. So it's not the scenario that was being presented to me where it's like we have $20 million in dead money, we're going to get it all back next year, and we're going to be good to go.
Like, you may technically be getting it may be coming off the books if it just happens to be that way. But you're not paying for any old players anymore, basically.
Yeah, players that were gone like 3
Could've
years
been
ago or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
We're not going to
still
be
gonna be-
we're not going to be paying for Mike Wallace when I'm 70.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, dude, if anybody paying for Mike Wallace at 70, like, what did you sign him to, a 100-year contract?
Don Carlos Stanton.
Okay, well that's the Marlins.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on the Marlins, please.
But yeah, it's nice when that dead money comes off because you do get, a little cap relief, and you don't have to lose anybody. But what I'm interested in knowing, Ian, maybe you could help me out with this, is do you think it's going to be possible for them to keep Olivier Vernon and Lamar Miller next year?
I think it'll be possible. I don't think they're going to have a chance.
Vernon's
Vernon.
Vernon's just statistically going to have a huge season because Wake and Sue are stacked on one side. So all Vernon is going to have to do is clean up the mess. I mean, he could have 15 sacks next year, but not be indicative of his own abilities, and we could end up losing him for that reason, and Oakland could go out and sign him for $100 million or something, not 100, but Oakland could go out and sign him to something ridiculous just because he had flashy stats.
Yeah, and that's what it's really going to come down to, because like free agency teams, they always seem to overpay for the stats, and we saw it this last offseason. He's probably like a $7 to $8 million a year player, and I think he's probably going to make somewhere around like 11. Like look at what McPhee made from Chicago this year. I would expect that kind of contract. I can't remember the exact numbers that he got, but he's probably a really good comp for what Vernon's going to get. And I just don't think Miami's going to be willing to do that. I don't think they need to do that.
I think in the same way that Cleveland overpaid a little bit. I know it's a different position, but Paul Kruger.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's going to be a very similar thing where Miami is saying, I mean, we're looking at you in our building. We know your real value. And I know Vernon, he has the impact of being a fan favorite. I mean, because of the U and everything. But
he's a good player.
Right, he's a good player, but he's not worth mortgaging our cap situation. If I had to pick between the two, I'm picking Lamar Miller.
Right. You can replace him. Like, I wouldn't worry about – if people are worried about Vernon, I wouldn't worry about him. Like, you can replace him. You've got Derek Shelby. You've got Fede. You can replace him with an early round pick.
Isn't Shelby in a contract year too, though?
He is.
Yeah, but he's not going to get paid. He's not going to get paid huge.
He's not going to get paid huge, but it's going to be something significant because as far as I know, Shelby could start for a few teams.
He could, yeah, but he's more of a run defender, so he doesn't have like the huge stats either. So I think you're probably looking at a much more modest contract, maybe like $4 or $5 million a year.
I think like what we gave Kawamisi, maybe even like a little bit less than that.
Yeah, and you're looking at like the same type of price range for Lamar Miller. I don't think they're going to bring Miller back.
Miller's going to come in negotiations. I think his agents are going to come in at Justin Forsett's number.
Isn't Drew Rosenhaus his agent?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're going to come in at Justin Forsett's number, and then we're just going to have to hope they'll work down.
Yeah, and just watch to see how they use him, because if they use him like more often than last year, that's probably telling you that they're DeMarco Murraying him.
Yup. They could give him. They could put him out there and just let him run until he breaks down. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's why a lot of these college guys, like back to Miles Jack, that's why guys like him aren't lining up at running back, even though they could probably play it, just because that's not where the NFL is trending, and guys will wear you down at that position, like Ricky Williams. Yeah, like Ricky Williams.
Hey, Ian, this is Chad. I have a question for you since we're talking salary cap, because this has been confusing to me. So, Deion Jordan is suspended for the year, and from what I understand, that means he doesn't count against this year's salary cap because he's suspended. Do you know, do they get another year out of him then because he was out this year, or do they just lose? I assume that Deion Jordan signed a 5-year deal when he was a rookie, but he's been suspended for a year, and I didn't know if that meant because they gave him guaranteed money, if that means Deion Jordan then has another year extended onto his contract.
Yeah, so I'm not 1,000% sure on this, but I'm if it's the same as Josh Gordon, then his contract will not toll, and it'll basically just extend his contract, whatever was remaining already.
So essentially, it'll pretend that the year never happened.
Yes. Which is the same as Josh Gordon, because Josh Gordon was going to be a unrestricted free agent after this season, and then he went and was an idiot, and now he's going to be a restricted free agent again. And so I think the same is going to be for Deion Jordan, where it just, because you have to play, I think it's a certain amount of games where you're active, and he's obviously not going to be active for it due to suspension. So it's just going to basically extend his contract. But I would expect them to cut him. I'd be kind of surprised if they bring him back.
I'd be incredibly. I mean, unless something crazy happens, unless there's a regime change and someone, because I mean, let's remember, this isn't Dennis Hickey's guy. This is the last of our remnants of Jeff Ireland, and it will be an
not really. Remember, Tannehill was Jeff Ireland.
But no, I'm saying remnants of the bad.
Yeah.
Remnants of the bad. I'm saying once we sever ties with Deion Jordan, we are liberated.
Yeah.
from Jeff Ireland. Jeff
And I
Ireland
think-
made some good
I
picks.
think
I mean, we
it's
still have Rashad Jones after the 5th round.
What about Dallas Thomas?
Well, yeah. Well, we have some things that set us up nicely. I mean, we have to say that draft with
Ireland did really well on the day
Miller, Pouncey, and Tannehill in that one draft is what kind of has us where we are today.
Yeah, he had some really nice day 3 picks. Like
Yep.
he had decent
Soliai.
first round picks, and he
Soliai
had
was a late pick. He was old.
Yeah.
He was really good for us for a while.
so like he deserves some credit because he had a big fingerprint on like the good players on this team. He just missed on like those day 2 picks, which you can't do.
He
I
sucked
mean, that's
at second
critical.
rounders. He absolutely
Yeah.
sucked at second rounders.
We effectively traded Vontae Davis for Jonathan Martin.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and Sean Smith hurts too because he's even better.
He's
than
great
Devontae.
now. I mean, right now.
But those guys
Yeah, why
weren't.
you gotta bring us down next?
I'm not bringing us. I'm not bringing us down. I'm just trying to help. We're talking about the good. There's still Michael Agnew.
We can't talk about the good and not talk about the bad.
That's true. We do have to say disclaimer: Michael Agnew, Deion Jordan, everything that could have gone wrong, Mr. Ted Ginn, everything that
And his family.
and Ted Ginn. I was reading Rolling Stone did a great profile on Des Bryant, and I was really surprised that I didn't read about Jeff Ireland and Des Bryant's mother in that.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, back to what you're saying. I mean, this off season, it's really we're gonna have to see where we end up in the draft and what ends up happening with the picks because the contract negotiations could depend on who we can replace. Because if this year ends up being like last year, where last year's draft you said you can get a running back in the 2nd and 3rd round, then maybe we have to let Miller walk. And if there's a shortage on defensive talent, maybe we have to keep Vernon. It entirely depends on what's going on in the draft.
If it turns out like last year, Max, then we're gonna have to reevaluate how the Dolphins draft everything because it's probably gonna be a regime change.
Well, I meant last year. Okay, yeah, fair. Very fair.
Like, oh, we're gonna have to draft power guys now.
Right.
Oh, I'm praying.
I think a lot of it's gonna be on Terrence Fede. I mean, what he can do.
He's a special pass rusher.
Here, and if he can really make a name for himself, then Vernon is completely. And if either one of the two running backs, Damian Williams or J.J., if they come on in the season, then maybe we don't pay for Lamar. So,
Vernon's gonna start slashing. Vernon's gonna start slashing Fide's tires before the games.
He'll get paid either way. It's just is it going to be from us? I don't know.
Right. I mean, he's going to get paid more if it isn't from us. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
That whatever we come in at, a team like Oakland is going to come in higher.
Oh, for sure.
But you've got to. There's an unbelievable amount of. It could end up being a factor. We're negotiating with two guys who both went to University of Miami, and have pretty substantial reasons to want to stay with the Dolphins. And I mean, I'm not saying they're going to take a huge pay cut. I think Lamar Miller would be more willing because I mean, he went to Killian. He grew up in Miami. Grew up.
And it's a positional thing too. Like,
right.
He'd be really hard pressed to get more than like $4.5 million, I think, on the open market.
Right. I mean, even the only guy who's getting paid is like Peterson, and I mean, DeMarco Murray got paid from Philly, but I don't think Lamar Miller's going to. Marshawn's making money. That's fair. Marshawn is making money, but Marshawn is an absolute.
Yeah, there's this tier of like elite, like the elite are obviously getting paid, and then after that, like the top deal is like $4 million a year.
Justin Forsett, I mean, that was it. Justin Forsett was the nail in the coffin for these guys who were not in the top 5 of running backs, but could be borderline top 10.
Yep.
Justin Forsett's deal last offseason was the nail in the coffin, and he held out, hoping he would get more. And I mean, the last big deal we saw for a running back in between was Ray Rice, and I mean, because he wasn't a top 5 guy necessarily, but he was a top guy, and his deal was big. And I think after that, you saw, because I mean, they had a string of bad luck with running backs. I mean, Arian Foster got a big deal, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. The only other guy that we did neglect to mention who's getting paid is Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles.
The LaShawn McCoy still making them. LaShawn McCoy's still making money though, right?
I mean, that's because Buffalo isn't spending any money on a quarterback. They should probably just figure out the Wildcat before the season starts and roll it back.
I'm sure Tim Tebow will get released and he'll be available, so they can run the ball.
Yes!
I'm surprised Rex Ryan hasn't picked up Tim Tebow with how much he wants to run the ball.
Rex Ryan and whatever Rex Ryan is doing in Buffalo is just it's so amusing just because for some reason I feel like he just thinks he can do the same thing twice and get away with it.
Rex is doing what Rex does. He only cares about his defense.
I mean his dad buddy never taught him what an offense was. I mean, we're still looking at Jim McMahon as the best quarterback in the Ryan family history. And I mean, I just don't know.
Max, how old are you?
I am 19, but I mean, I've watched plenty of NFL Network. I had to think about that one.
Like who? I was having a young moment, but then I realized oh my god, I'm having an old moment.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I lost my remote one day and I was stuck on NFL Network for 18 months. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of guys on the open market. That's another thing. Contract-wise, I think we can get rid of Matt Moore and save some money just because there's so many quarterbacks that you could find. I mean, honestly, at this point, I think we'd be hard-pressed to not say. That's why Freeman and Bethel Thompson are going to be gone because they'll both be there.
I don't know what happened to Matt Moore. He's suddenly just not good anymore. Like he was one of the best backups in the league last year, and now it's like, where'd it go?
Yep.
He's lacked any kind of confidence or rhythm. I mean, and it always seems the same. It seems like in the first half he's doing okay, and then when you bring him in, first half he's not doing well, and then when you bring him in for the second half against scrubs, he'll do something. I mean, like against Carolina, he was awful, and then he had that one really good drive with Matt Hazel where he completed 4 of 4 third downs, but it's just not enough to justify what we're paying him.
Right.
Well, do you guys have options? Because please don't say Josh Freeman.
Well, here's the thing. If Tannehill gets hurt anyway, for
the season,
it's done. We're done.
So I honestly would think just roll with Bethel Thompson, until the draft because it's not like Matt Moore's going to be. I know and it's hard to hear that, but it's like realistically, what are you going to accomplish with Matt Moore? He's been awful the last 2 preseasons. You can't. He's been so bad you can't even try to evaluate these other receivers because he can't get the ball close to him.
Yeah. I mean, it could be spot duty too. You know, Tannehill has never missed a game, but he has had to go out of games.
Yeah.
And I trust just from a taking care of the ball standpoint. Maybe not. Matt Moore's a little bit trigger happy, but
he's pretty reckless.
Yeah. But he's actually had some success, and if it comes to something like that, you're right. If Tannehill is out for an extended period of time, we're done. But if it's 2 games, one game, I kind of want something a little more stable there.
That's true.
Instead of
that's fair.
Who hasn't really wowed me.
Chad, you've been pretty quiet.
I think Matt Moore's pretty safe because I don't think they're going to take Josh Freeman over Matt Moore, I would question their sanity if they did. Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't think they would be probably a playoff contending team, definitely not a Super Bowl contending team with Matt Moore, but he could probably play 3 or 4 games, and with the team they have assembled, they could still hopefully win a game or 2 and still be competitive. I don't think they could be competitive with Freeman or McLeod right now at quarterback. I just don't think they could. But ideally, and a lot of people have been saying for it, at some point they need to consider maybe just drafting a guy that's a second, third round type quarterback that they can develop. But that's Tannehill's so young that's hard to do. But
that's just going to open up the floodgates for Omar to say this guy's going to replace Tannehill with his gunslinging ways.
Well, I mean, you just got to look at it. I mean, that's highlighting the point of how hard it is to get good quarterbacks, and that's the haves and have-nots of the league. And Buffalo right now would love to have Ryan Tannehill. The reason Rex Ryan isn't naming a starting quarterback is he's realizing
he named Tyrod Taylor the starter.
Well, I know, but the reason that was a drawn-out process is because he didn't have anybody he feels good about starting. If he had Peyton Manning there right now, that wouldn't be a question. And so, that's the way it works. And at least Tannehill's progressed now that we have a solid quarterback, and that's the hardest thing. You look what Buffalo did, and they remind me so much of what Miami was like under Sperano, where they've got a very good defense, they've got a fairly solid roster assembled, but they don't have a good quarterback, and that usually ends up making you like an 8-8 football team, and that's the worst because you don't have a bad enough year to go get one of the 2 or 3 top quarterbacks that come out into the draft, and it's nearly impossible to get a quality quarterback on the open free agent market, and so you kind of end up in this cycle of mediocrity, and you can't get out of it until you can get your hands on a quarterback. And so you got to either be really bad and suck for luck like the Colts did, when those guys are available, or you got to get extremely lucky like Seattle did with Russell Wilson or the Patriots did with Brady. But I mean, that's like winning the lottery to get a good quarterback that's not one of the top 2 or 3 guys every year.
You gotta, yeah, and I totally agree with that, Chad. Finding a good QB is ridiculous, and this is when the argument comes in: is that, well, if you have this guy and you're gonna have to pay him, because who are you going to get that is automatically going to be better? Because this is what it is: is that when you are a team that is in the mediocre range and is not in the terrible range as it is, if you're in the terrible range, it's usually because A, your quarterback is terrible to begin with, or B, you just drafted one before that and you're just not willing to wait for it. Kind of like Tennessee with Zach Mettenberger. Granted, Mettenberger's nothing to write home about, but Mettenberger was supposed to be the drafted quarterback of the future, and then 1 year later they're bringing in Mariota. So it's like, okay, there's literally no patience there whatsoever. You want somebody who's going to come in and ball out right now, and it doesn't really work that way all the time. The Colts happened to get lucky with once in a blue moon, maybe once in 2 blue moons, quarterback with Andrew Luck. Like, how many quarterbacks come into the league already knowing what they're going to have to do and how they're going to do it? That doesn't happen. You got to let your quarterbacks and every other position, just to be on this for the disclaimer, you got to let your quarterbacks slow cook for a while, and then you can get an evaluation of what they're going to do. Because Andy Dalton's cooked enough. We know what any team is going to get out of Andy Dalton, but the Bengals had to pay him. They really had no choice in the matter. Who were they going to go get? There was really nobody else available at the time. So yeah, pay Dalton. Flacco is a Super Bowl winning quarterback with a Super Bowl defense led by Ray Lewis, who somehow willed his team to victory. But yeah, Joe Flacco, go ahead and pay him huge money because he's freaking Joe Flacco, Super Bowl MVP, although I think it should have been Ray Lewis because they wouldn't have been there without him.
Yep.
So you look at it like, okay, there's nobody else, time to go out and do it. We would have paid Tannehill anyway, even if he wasn't necessarily trending up the way he is, because it's like, who are you going to go get? Mariota's not going to be there when it's your turn to pick. Winston wasn't going to be there when you were going to pick because he was going to go first, and pretty much everybody knew it. So that leaves you with who? There's nobody.
Yeah, that's what I meant, Lewis. You gotta to get those guys after the first 2 or 3 high-end prospects. It gets pretty hard to get a guy that's going to reasonably be able to play for you. And even when you get those high-end prospects, it's rolling the dice to extent, and you got to be patient. I mean, Tannehill by no means as a rookie was that good. I mean, he had a lot of potential, but
you saw flashes, but it wasn't there yet. It's like, got to get past the ugly
you're
first.
going to see that same exact stuff out of Winston and Mariota, and you got to wonder, will those teams be able to sustain maybe not really being contenders for a couple of years? Will those quarterbacks really learn the game, or will they develop into the next generation of good quarterbacks? You don't know. So, I mean, that's when you're looking at the backup quarterback, that's tough. But Matt Moore, I would say the way he's looked in preseason, you do have to wonder, like, why don't you have somebody like Tebow or even Josh Freeman at a league minimum? Because Ian's got a great point. You're not probably going to be that successful anyway with Matt Moore. So why don't you take that money and get a better backup offensive tackle next year, or another solid reserve corner, because at least they're going to be contributing to the team, directly versus your quarterback. But that's a tough call. But it's interesting that Freeman, he was very. I think he played maybe a couple series, but he looked sharp when he did play. Josh Freeman did. So
who? When?
On the last preseason game, he looked good in that game against.
Define good, Chad.
He was accurate. He got the ball out where he was supposed to. He looked better than Matt Moore. So, and now I'm not saying Josh Freeman.
I'm crying right now. I'm actually crying right now. Real tears.
You thought Matt Moore looked better than Josh Freeman last
No,
game?
no, I'm crying because of Matt Moore. I'm crying because of how the mighty have fallen.
Oh,
What we're seeing from Matt Moore.
Matt Moore's better than Tannehill.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
David Garrard too. We should have a reunion party. We should bring them all back.
Yeah, like
Matt
Omar
Moore
would always say he's a
not
gamer.
played well. He's played bad. I mean, that's concerning. It's not. I mean, he's what he had like 3 or 4 turnovers now in the limited time he's played in the preseason. You can't blame it all on him. I know he had his arm hit in the last game, and the other one. Yeah, I think Dallas Thomas got beat, but he held the ball, and I think his drop was too far, too, from where it was supposed to be. So I don't think it was exclusively the lineman getting beat. And, if that were the case, how come Tannehill isn't turning the ball over like Matt Moore is? So I think it's one of those things where you really got to question that salary right now, what he's getting paid when they're coming into these next 2 years probably where they've got to be somewhat creative and they've got to figure out how to get these corners cut to make sure they can keep some salary space. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I feel you, Chad. Okay, so we kind of ran a little long, but I want to get to this really quickly, just finishing it up right now, and then we'll end the show. Fred Jackson was released by the Buffalo Bills, and immediately I got a bunch of tweets saying that we should go after him because he can get the tough yards and he's a veteran and blah, 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 and all that stuff. So really quick, guys, you from left to right on the screen, who's going to go first? Should we get him or no?
No. He's always been in power schemes, so I mean I don't know if he's really going to translate too well to his own.
And even beyond that,
34.
Lamar Miller didn't spend all that time in the gym for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean Lamar Miller's added bulk, and we've seen it. I mean, there's we can see what is happening with Lamar Miller in the games. I mean, he's getting tough yards, and we have Damian Williams, and Damian Williams' skill set is, I mean, he's not as powerful, but there's no reason. And then we'd have to cut another back, and we've already got Ajayi and LaMichael James returning. There's just no room. There's no room for.
I just realized that my screen is not going to be the same as you guys' screens.
Right. Exactly. I think we all took a second then.
That's like herp skirp derp moment. Okay. So Chad.
No. I mean, I think that Fred Jackson's going to get a home, and I actually think he would be a solid short yardage running back. But in Miami, it would make sense because I think Damian Williams is more powerful than Lamar Miller even. I like his build. I think he can be, some of those tough yards. And obviously, you really can't cut LaMichael James because I think he has pretty much, solidified that he's going to be the return man, and Fred Jackson can't do that at all. And you're not going to cut Ajayi. I mean, he has a lot of. He's very, very raw, and he has a lot of work to do. But he's got a ton of potential, and so there's no spot for him on the Dolphins. So I can't see any scenario where it makes sense to sign Fred Jackson.
Efren. Hello. Efren's gone.
You must have lost. I guess the one caveat I would throw in there is I would change my mind if we had a severe injury, like if Damian Williams got hurt this week or we lost one of our backs, for the year to like a torn ACL or something, then I'd consider it, but not otherwise.
Okay, and one last quick note. Trent Richardson was released by the Raiders. Should we go after him? I think we all agree on this one. All together, everybody? No.
No.
All
I will
right,
have to say, I mean, that's it's so disappointing. So disappointing how Trent Richardson's career is.
I thought you were about to add like a little caveat. Well, maybe if.
No.
Just wait. He'll get signed by New England and he'll run for 1,500 yards and.
Hey, Chad, please don't make my heart hurt, man. Not tonight. I've had a long day. All right, so we went a little long, but that's okay. Ian, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been great having you.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So can we expect to have you back sometime soon?
Yeah. Just let me know whenever.
Sweet. All
hey,
right.
Lewis, I'm gonna throw everybody listening. I throw out Ian's Twitter. I follow him on Twitter, and he does extensive film analysis.
Really great.
He's really good.
any Dolphins fan who doesn't follow Ian absolutely has to. One of the essentials.
Yeah, exactly. You can follow Ian at NFL Film Study, and like I told him on Twitter, like even if I may have disagreed a little bit with his Dallas Thomas evaluation, I got mad respect for him. He's worked hard to get where he's at, and anybody who has a Twitter and is looking to get into the Dolphins Twitter, immediately follow this man. He knows what he's talking about. So, Ian, I want to thank you, and also you can follow Mac Himmelreck at The Deep End Miami. And Max, I want to thank you for joining us today. We kind of needed some backup today.
Yeah, of course. Totally happy to be on anytime. Love, any excuse to talk Dolphins and not annoy all my friends with it.
Yeah.
All right. So, on behalf of PhinManiacs, Ian Wharton, Max Himmelreck, I want to Chad Ronenbaum, Efren Ramos, and myself, Louis Sung. I want to thank you guys for joining us for this edition of PhinManiacs Live. And if you want to watch if you want to listen to the show again sometime later, it'll be embedded onto the website soon, and just be ready for it when it comes out. So, good night, everybody.
Good night.